The iPad Pro is probably one of my favorite devices of all time. I've had this 2018 edition for a good few years now, and it's pretty much with me wherever I go. It's fast, the battery is amazing, it runs pretty much all apps flawlessly, and it just does everything I actually want out of a tablet. I've written and planned many of my videos on this very iPad. I've edited photography gigs directly in front of clients, I've played most of the Apple Arcade games, and I've watched hundreds of hours of video. I even bought an Apple Pencil in an ill-advised attempt to learn to draw during the lockdowns in 2020. I didn't get far. It's a device that I know well and really enjoy using, and it's opened up a lot of interesting ways to both work and play that I really didn't get to do before I owned this thing. But despite all of the cool things this can do and how well it can do them, I've never really considered this a direct replacement for my computer. But could all of that change now that the iPad Pro is running on the same silicon that is powering their iMacs and laptops? Well, this is the new iPad Pro. I've got the 12.9-inch version, and it's got a few major updates compared to last year. Let me go through them. Number one, it has the M1 chip in it. It's the same system on a chip you find in the M1 MacBooks and this iMac. That's just so much power for a tablet. Number two, the 12.9-inch version has the XDR Retina display, which is just a ridiculously good display to come with the tablet. Number three, it now has Thunderbolt in its single port, potentially unlocking much faster data transfers. Number four, it has an updated selfie cam, which facilitates something called center stage mode. Number five, you can opt for a 5G enabled version of this device, which is actually a first for the iPad. Just on 5G real quick, I still don't think it's worth buying an entire device just for that purpose. Unless you live or work in a 5G area, it's pretty likely you'll be on 4G most of the time when using this iPad, at least in Australia. So it's a nice bit of future-proofing, but it's certainly not an entire reason to buy this thing. Before I get any deeper into all of that new stuff, let's see what hasn't changed. From the outside, this iPad Pro is basically what we've seen since 2018. It's a slab of glass with a slab of aluminium on the back. I mean, you can't really go wrong here. I think this kind of design for the iPad Pro is pretty much bang on what you want out of a tablet. The front is almost 100% display, but it has thick enough bezels that you can safely hold it by the edges without accidental screen touches. Any extra physical buttons or ports are kind of left to be sorted out by your peripherals, like the Magic Keyboard. You will probably want to buy some kind of keyboard, and the pencil too, by the way. The iPad Pro just doesn't really feel complete without them. Actually, if you are thinking of buying an iPad and want to get a keyboard, hit subscribe because next week we've got a video coming out that will help you decide between the two keyboards that Apple offers on checkout. That's the Smart Keyboard Folio and this one, which is the Magic Keyboard. Also, the battery is as good as ever, sticking to the usual expectations of roughly around 10 hours. The addition of the M1 chip and XDR display does mean this 12.9-inch iPad Pro is slightly thicker and heavier than last year's model, so you'll need to purchase a new case for the device if you're upgrading. If you do have an older case and don't want to shell out that extra money again, it will probably fit in it fine, but just not perfectly. If you opt for the 11-inch version, it's only a couple of 100 grams heavier than last year, but it is the same dimensions, so that one will fit any previous case you've owned. On the rear, I'll turn it around so you can see it, we've got the same camera array that was in last year's model. The coolest feature on the camera array is definitely still the LiDAR, and I had a lot of fun creating janky scans of my house and dog with it, and imagining where I'd put fancy new IKEA furniture in AR. I've never really considered cameras on a tablet essential for photography, but they are useful as sensors for creative or administrative tasks. But hey, here are some example photos for you. What do you reckon? Let me know in the comments. The selfie camera, oh, you like that spin? The selfie camera on the front side has had some improvements. It's still very efficient at recognizing you with Face ID so you can log in and make payments and stuff like that, but it's now 12 megapixels as opposed to last model's 7. It also uses a feature called center stage, which is used to kind of keep you in shot as you move around the room while on a video call. So this is what it looks like when you call someone over a new M1 iPad with center stage turned on. It kind of follows you around. It's nice and smooth. I like how smoothly the camera kind of follows you. It's kind of like an actual camera person is following you around with a tripod. It also zooms in quite close to your face if you get closer, but if I walk further away, it's a nice little mid shot. Well, it still baffles me why the selfie cam is on this little side area of the iPad when the iPad is in landscape mode, which is really the only way you'll be using this. That really doesn't make sense because I'm constantly looking over to the side rather than at you into the camera. If this was up the top, it would be a better eye line for sure, just like pretty much every laptop. I must admit, it's a bit weird to find it in the iPad, which you can just pick up and move around, as opposed to something like the iMac. I would expect it in something that's harder to physically move. Right now, it's a little bit novel and certainly not something I would actually buy an iPad for, but as someone who films themselves quite often, it has got me kind of excited about where they could take this tech moving forward. Maybe if they put it in a stronger camera than the selfie camera and started applying it to more creative apps, it could, it could do some really cool things. As you can hear, the microphones are also doing a pretty decent job of picking up my voice as well. Normally, you should be able to hear the street behind my house, which is quite noisy, quite a busy road. I've got all my windows open, so you should be able to hear a fair bit of traffic noise, but if you listen, it's not too bad. Like I said, I don't really know who'll be using this that often because you can just pick up and move the iPad around, but that said, it's a cool feature. And if you are looking for a device to do video calls on, this one is a pretty good one. The 4 thin speakers on either side are also fantastic. They generate sound that kind of takes you by surprise when you first hear it. And when it's right in front of you, you're basically treated to personal surround sound. People say I'm so unpretentious for a genius. And just like many of the iPads before it, this iPad Pro is just absolutely spectacular at doing anything media-based, whether it's playing video games or watching movies or streaming music. All of it is just incredible on this device. If you're buying one of these for that sort of stuff, you will not be disappointed. And I think this particular model is actually the best media device Apple have ever made, ever. The main reason I think that, besides the stuff we've already discussed, is this beautiful XDR Retina display. Unfortunately, if you go with the 11-inch version, you won't get this display, you just get a regular Retina display, but everything else I've said still stands. The display is gorgeous and it can hit 1000 nits at peak brightness, which is way brighter than pretty much anything you've likely owned. Combine that with the smooth 120Hz refresh rate and it's the best screen on any tablet and pretty much any Apple product to date. It's kind of hard to show exactly what's going on since I'm filming the screen, but as you can see, at peak brightness, this is just blowing away pretty much any other screen I have access to. Even the new iMac screen, and I was pretty impressed with that when I reviewed it. Blacks are noticeably blacker, and contrast between colors is better than on most other displays. This is most noticeable when watching videos that are also published in HDR, but you can also see minor improvements in older, low resolution or low bitrate videos too. By being so bright, it also means this is actually way easier to see outside in bright daylight. Great screen. Let's talk about the other headliner here, the M1 chip. It makes this an absolute beast in terms of specs, especially for a tablet. On benchmark tests, it actually is on par with all of Apple's other M1 products, and when I used it, even on the most demanding apps, everything just worked. Performance-wise, you just can't ask for much better. The problem is, it's still just an iPad, and iPads running iPadOS are nothing like computers. There's a lot of marketing from Apple around this device that pretty much positions it as a companion to professionals. It has Thunderbolt, a ridiculous display, the M1 chip, so much power. Excuse me, but for someone who has been a professional filmmaker and photographer for almost a decade now, I would just not rely on an iPad for that kind of work. The stuff it's actually good at are all the fun parts of those jobs. Retouching photos, assembling video edits, drawing graphics, even doing photo scans with LiDAR. All of that fun stuff does take a little while to get used to if you're moving from working on a desktop to the iPad, but it does work really well and ultimately is super fun on this thing. It's all the less fun stuff that the iPad is actually quite bad at compared to a desktop, and it's not because of what's inside of it, hardware-wise, it's all software-based. File management, for example, is crucial to professional workflows, but file management on the iPad is straight up abysmal compared to the experience you can get on computers. The file program just does not make sense. Despite having a Thunderbolt port, there aren't even any ways to directly interact with the hard drive that you plug into this, so you can't format them and you can't scan them if they have errors. For pros, that sort of stuff is actually kind of important. Another issue with iPadOS, all of the apps that you download are pretty much you get what you get. You can't really customize them at all. I'm going to bet that pretty much any creative professional out there who is watching this uses at least 1 or 2 third-party plugins during the creative process. You're just not really able to do that on iPadOS. Not to mention the apps like Photoshop, despite almost looking exactly the same, can't actually do the same level of tasks. Another thing, you'll be pretty disappointed when you try and plug this into a second display. It essentially just mirrors the iPad, but it's in 4:3 most of the time. There are a few exceptions like video streaming apps and the video editing software LumaFusion, but there are no options to switch up how these treat the second display. It's certainly not customizable like a laptop. Finally, and I've pretty much brought this up in every Apple video I've made, it only has one port. If this were really made for pro use, it would stand to reason that it would have at least 2 ports, one for charging and one for a display. But you pretty much have to start buying dongles as soon as you buy this thing. So based on all of that info and the fact that I've been using an older iPad Pro for years, I would not ever recommend this as a single device to run your professional life. No matter how much M1 power is coursing through its electronics. At most, you'll probably find it's an additional tool in your professional toolkit, one that will open up options for you when you don't want to bring an entire laptop along. The problem is, it's just too expensive to justify as an additional device on top of a MacBook or desktop computer, with most builds, including a keyboard, costing way more than a capable MacBook anyway. If you actually really need to buy a device for work, you should probably just buy a MacBook. And hey, if you just want access to all the fun stuff that this can do, like playing games, watching movies, and running cool apps, then you might just be as happy with an iPad Air or last year's iPad Pros. Everything still runs flawlessly on those things, and they cost a lot less money too. All of this doesn't mean that the M1 iPad Pro doesn't have a home. I see the reason to buy this as the same reason why I bought my older one in 2018. I just wanted something lighter than my laptop that I could also slip into my camera bag and take everywhere. I could edit photos, I could email people, I could write, it's great to write on by the way, I could access all of my cloud files, and I could do all of that with it running flawlessly without worrying about battery life and performance issues and stuff like that. This M1 iPad Pro is just the peak of that experience. It's fun, it's powerful, and it does almost everything you want it to do. If you're looking for one of Apple's best devices ever, this is it. It's just going to cost you a lot of money. Thank you very much for watching this review. Please hit like if it helped in your purchasing decision in any way, or if you just enjoyed it. Love to hear your feedback as well in the comments. Also, if you're thinking of buying an iPad Air or an iPad Pro, then you'll probably want a keyboard along with it too. We'll be doing a comparison of these 2 keyboards right here next week, so hit subscribe if you want to know when that one comes out. Until then, I'll see you next time.